Italy, officially the Italian Republic, is a country in southern and western Europe. Located in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, it consists of a peninsula delimited by the Alps and surrounded by several islands. Italy shares land borders with France, Switzerland, Austria, Slovenia, and the enclaved microstates of Vatican City and San Marino. It has a territorial exclave in Switzerland and an archipelago in the African plate. Italy covers an area of 301,340 km², with a population of nearly 60 million. It is the 10th largest country by land area in the European continent and the third most populous member state of the European Union. Its capital and largest city is Rome. The Italian peninsula was historically the native place and destination of numerous ancient peoples. The Latin city of Rome in central Italy, founded as the Roman kingdom, became a republic that conquered the Mediterranean world and ruled it for centuries as an empire. With the spread of Christianity, Rome became the seat of the Catholic Church and of the papacy. During the early Middle Ages, Italy experienced the fall of the Western Roman Empire and inward migration from Germanic tribes. By the 11th century, Italian city-states and maritime republics expanded, bringing renewed prosperity through commerce and laying the groundwork for modern capitalism. The Italian Renaissance flourished in Florence during the 15th and 16th centuries and spread to the rest of Europe. Italian explorers also discovered new routes to the Far East and the New World, helping to usher in the European age of discovery. However, centuries of rivalry and infighting between the Italian city-states, among other factors, left the peninsula divided into numerous states until the late modern period. During the 17th and 18th centuries, the Italian economic and commercial importance significantly waned. After centuries of political and territorial divisions, Italy was almost entirely unified in 1861 following wars of independence and the Expedition of the Thousand, establishing the Kingdom of Italy. From the late 19th century to the early 20th century, Italy rapidly industrialized, mainly in the north, and acquired a colonial empire, while the south remained largely impoverished and excluded from industrialization, fueling a large immigrant diaspora. From 1915 to 1918, Italy took part in World War I on the side of the Entente and against the Central Powers. In 1922, following a period of crisis and turmoil, the Italian fascist dictatorship was established. During World War II, Italy was first part of the Axis until it surrendered to the Allied powers, and then, as part of its territory, was occupied by Nazi Germany with fascist collaboration, a co-belligerent of the Allies during the Italian resistance and the liberation of Italy. Following the end of the war, the country replaced the monarchy with a republic via referendum and enjoyed a prolonged economic boom, becoming a major advanced economy. Italy has the 8th largest nominal GDP in the world, the 2nd largest manufacturing industry in Europe. The country has a significant role in regional and global economic, military, cultural, and diplomatic affairs. Italy is a founding and leading member of the European Union, and it is in numerous international institutions, including NATO, the G7, the Mediterranean Union, and the Latin Union. The source of many inventions and discoveries, the country is considered a cultural superpower and has long been a global center of art, music, literature, cuisine, science and technology, and fashion. It has the world's largest number of World Heritage Sites and is the world's 5th most visited country. The hypotheses for the etymology of the name Italia are numerous. One is that it was borrowed via ancient Greek from the Oscan Vitliou land of cabs. Ancient Greek historian Dionysius of Halicarnassus gives this account together with the legend that Italy was named after Italus, mentioned also by Aristotle and Thucydides. According to Antiochus of Syracuse, the term Italy was used by the ancient Greeks to initially refer only to the southern portion of the Bruttium Peninsula corresponding to the modern province of Reggio and part of the provinces of Catanzaro and Vibo Valentia in southern Italy. Nevertheless, by his time the larger concept of Onatria and Italy had become synonymous, and the name also applied to most of Lucania as well. According to Strabo's Geographica, before the expansion of the Roman Republic, the name was used by ancient Greeks to indicate the land between the Strait of Messina and the line connecting the Gulf of Salerno and Gulf of Taranto, corresponding roughly to the current region of Calabria. The ancient Greeks gradually came to apply the name Italia to a larger region in addition to the Greek Italy. In the south, historians have suggested the existence of an Etruscan Italy covering variable areas of central Italy. The borders of Roman Italy, Italia, are better established. Cato's Origins, the first work of history composed in Latin, described Italy as the entire peninsula south of the Alps. According to Cato and several Roman authors, the Alps formed the walls of Italy. In 264 BC, Roman Italy extended from the Arno and Rubicon rivers of the center north to the entire south. The northern area of Cisalpine Gaul was occupied by Rome in the 220s BC and became considered geographically and de facto part of Italy, but remained politically and de jure separated. It was legally merged into the administrative unit of Italy in 42 BC by the triumvir Octavian, as already planned by Julius Caesar. The islands of Sardinia, Corsica, Sicily, and Malta were added to Italy by Diocletian in 292 AD, coinciding with the whole Italian geographical region. All its inhabitants were considered Italic and Roman. The Latin term Italicus was used to describe a man of Italy as opposed to a provincial or one from the Roman province. For example, Pliny the elder notably wrote in a letter Italicus is and provincialis, meaning are you an Italian or a provincial? The adjective Italianus, from which are derived the Italian name of the Italians, is from medieval Latin and was used alternatively with Italicus during the early modern period. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the Kingdom of Italy was created. After the Lombard invasions, Italia was retained as the name for their kingdom and for its successor kingdom within the Holy Roman Empire, which nominally lasted until 1806, although it had de facto disintegrated due to factional politics pitting the empire against the ascendant city republics in the 13th century. History. Prehistory and antiquity. Thousands of lower Paleolithic artifacts have been recovered from Monte Paviolo, dating as far back as 850,000 years. Excavations throughout Italy revealed a Neanderthal presence dating back to the Middle Paleolithic period some 200,000 years ago, while modern humans appeared about 40,000 years ago at Riparo Machai. Archaeological sites from this period include Adora Cave, Altamura, Zaprano, and Gravina in Puglia. The ancient peoples of pre-Roman Italy, such as the Umbrians, the Latins, Volsci-Oscans, Samnites, Sabines, the Celts, the Ligures, the Veneti, the Iapygians, and many others were Indo-European peoples, most of them specifically of the Italic group. The main historic peoples of possible non-Indo-European or pre-Indo-European heritage include the Etruscans of central and northern Italy, the Elymians and the Sicanians, Sicily, and the prehistoric Sardinians, who gave birth to the Nuragic civilization. Other ancient populations being of undetermined language families and of possible non-Indo-European origin include the Rhaetian people and Comuni, known for their rock carvings in Valcamonica, the largest collections of prehistoric petroglyphs in the world. A well-preserved natural mummy known as Ötzi the Iceman, determined to be 5,000 years old, was discovered in the Similon Glacier of South Tyrol in 1991. The first foreign colonizers were the Phoenicians, who initially established colonies and founded various emporiums on the coasts of Sicily and Sardinia. Some of these soon became small urban centers and were developed parallel to the ancient Greek colonies. Among the main centers there were the cities of Mantia Ziz, Saguntum in Sicily, and Nora Salsae and Pharos in Sardinia. Between the 17th and the 11th centuries BC, Mycenaean Greeks established contacts with Italy. In the 8th and 7th centuries BC, a number of Greek colonies were established starting at Pithecusae and eventually extending all along the southern part of the Italian peninsula and the coast of Sicily, an area that later became known as Magna Graecia. Ionian settlers founded Aleaeum region, Naxos, Zangles, Himera, and Catene. Doric colonists founded Taurus, Syracusae, Megara, Hyblaea, Leontinoi, Acragas, and Gelas. The Syracusans founded Ancon and Adria. The Megares founded Selinunt. The Achaeans founded Sybaris, Posidonia, Croton, Lacroi, Epizepherioi, and Metapontum. Tarentini and Thuriats found Heraclea. The Greek colonization placed the Italic peoples in contact with democratic forms of government and with high artistic and cultural expressions. Ancient Rome. Ancient Rome, a settlement around a ford on the river Tiber in central Italy and conventionally founded in 753 BC, was ruled for a period of 244 years by a monarchical system, initially with sovereigns of Latin and Sabine origin, later by Etruscan kings. The tradition handed down 7 kings: Romulus, Numa Pompilius, Tullus Postilius, Ancus Marcius, Tarquinius Priscus, Servius, Tullius, and Tarquinius Superbus. In 509 BC, the Romans expelled the last king from their city, favoring a government of the Senate and the people, and establishing an oligarchic republic. The Italian peninsula, named Italia, was consolidated into a single entity during the Roman expansion and conquest of new lands at the expense of the other Italic tribes, Etruscans, Celts, and Greeks. A permanent association with most of the local tribes and cities was formed, and Rome began the conquest of Western Europe, Northern Africa, and the Middle East. In the wake of Julius Caesar's rise and assassination in the 1st century BCE, Rome grew over the course of centuries into a massive empire stretching from Britain to the borders of Persia and engulfing the whole Mediterranean basin, in which Greek, Roman, and many other cultures merged into a unique civilization. The long and triumphant reign of the first emperor Augustus began a golden age of peace and prosperity. Roman Italy remained the metropole of the empire, and as the homeland of the Romans and the territory of the capital maintained a special status which made it. More than 2 centuries of stability followed, during which Italy was referred to as the end. The Roman Empire was among the most powerful economic, cultural, political, and military forces in the world of its time, and it was one of the largest empires in world history. At its height under Emperor Trajan, it covered 5 million square kilometers. The Roman legacy has deeply influenced Western civilization, shaping most of the modern world. Among the many legacies of Roman dominance are the widespread use of the Romance languages derived from Latin, the numerical system, the modern Western alphabet and calendar, and the emergence of Christianity as a major world religion. Middle Ages. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, Italy fell under the power of Odoacer's kingdom and, later, was seized by the Ostrogoths, followed in the 6th century by a brief reconquest under Byzantine Emperor Justinian. The invasion of another Germanic tribe, the Lombards, late in the same century, reduced the Byzantine presence to the rump realm of the Exarchate of Ravenna and started the end of political unity of the peninsula for the next 1300 years. The peninsula was therefore divided as follows. Northern Italy and Tuscany formed the Lombard kingdom, with its capital in Pavia, while in central southern Italy the Lombards controlled the duchies of Spoleto and Benevento. The remaining part of the peninsula remained under the Byzantines and was divided between the Exarchate of Italy based in Ravenna, the Duchy of Rome, the Duchy of Naples, the Duchy of Calabria, and Sicily, the latter directly dependent on the Emperor of Constantinople. Invasions of the peninsula caused a chaotic succession of barbarian kingdoms and the so-called Dark Ages. The Lombard kingdom was subsequently absorbed into the Frankish Empire by Charlemagne in the late 8th century and became the Kingdom of Italy. The Franks also helped the formation of the Papal States in central Italy. Until the 13th century, Italian politics was dominated by the relations between the Holy Roman Emperors and the papacy, with most of the Italian city-states siding with the former or with the latter for momentary convenience. The Germanic emperor and the Roman pontiff became the universal powers of medieval Europe. However, the conflict over the investiture controversy and the clash between Guelphs and Ghibellines led to the end of the imperial feudal system in the north of Italy, where city-states gained independence. The investiture controversy was finally resolved by the Concordat of Worms. In 1176, a league of city-states, the Lombard League, defeated the German Emperor Frederick Barbarossa at the Battle of Legnano, thus ensuring effective independence for most of northern and central Italian cities. Italian city-states such as Milan, Florence, and Venice played a crucial innovative role in financial development, devising the main instruments and practices of banking and the emergence of new forms of social and economic organization. In coastal and southern areas, the maritime republics grew to eventually dominate the Mediterranean and monopolize trade routes to the Orient. They were independent, thalassocratic city-states, though most of them originated from territories once belonging to the Byzantine Empire. All these cities during the time of their independence had similar systems of government in which the merchant class had considerable power. Although in practice these were oligarchical and bore little resemblance to a modern democracy, the relative political freedom they afforded was conducive to academic and artistic advancement. The four best-known maritime republics were Venice, Genoa, Pisa, and Amalfi. The others were Ancona, Gitanoli, and Ragusa. Each of the maritime republics had dominion over different overseas lands, including many Mediterranean islands, lands on the Adriatic, Aegean, and Black Sea, and commercial colonies in the Near East and in North Africa. Venice maintained enormous tracts of land in Greece, Cyprus, Istria, and Dalmatia until as late as the mid-17th century. Venice and Genoa were Europe's main gateways to trade with the East and producers of fine glass, while Florence was a capital of silk, wool, banking, and jewelry. The wealth such business brought to Italy meant that large public and private artistic projects could be commissioned. The republics were heavily involved in the Crusades, providing support and transport, but most especially taking advantage of the political and trading opportunities resulting from these wars. Italy first felt the huge economic changes in Europe which led to the commercial revolution. The Republic of Venice was able to defeat the Byzantine Empire and finance the voyages of Marco Polo to Asia. The first universities were formed in Italian cities, and scholars such as Thomas Aquinas obtained international fame. Frederick I of Sicily made Italy the political cultural center of a reign that temporarily included the Holy Roman Empire and the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Capitalism and banking families emerged in Florence, where Dante and Giotto were active around 1300. In the south, Sicily had become an Arab-Islamic emirate in the 9th century, thriving until the Italo-Normans conquered it in the late 11th century, together with most of the Lombard and Byzantine principalities of southern Italy. Through a complex series of events, southern Italy developed as a unified kingdom, first under the House of Hohenstaufen, then under the Capetian House of Anjou, and from the 15th century the House of Aragon. In Sardinia, the former Byzantine provinces became independent states, known in Italian as Judicates, although some parts of the island fell under Genoese or Pisan rule until eventual Aragonese annexation in the 15th century. The Black Death of 1348 left its mark on Italy by killing perhaps one-third of the population. Early modern Italy was the birthplace and heart of the Renaissance during the 1400s and 1500s. The Italian Renaissance marked the transition from the medieval period to the modern age as Europe recovered economically and culturally from the crises of the late Middle Ages and entered the early modern period. The Italian polities were now regional states effectively ruled by princes, de facto monarchs in control of trade and administration, and their courts became major centers of the arts and sciences. The Italian princedoms represented a first form of modern states as opposed to feudal monarchies and multinational empires. The princedoms were led by political dynasties and merchant families such as the Medici in Florence, the Visconti in Sforza in the Duchy of Milan, the Doria in the Republic of Genoa, the Loredan, Mosigo, and Barbarigo in the Republic of Venice, the Este in Ferrara, and the Gonzaga in Mantua. The Renaissance was therefore a result of the wealth accumulated by Italian merchant cities combined with the patronage of its dominant families. Italian Renaissance exercised a dominant influence on subsequent European painting and sculpture for centuries afterwards, with artists such as Leonardo da Vinci, Brunelleschi, Botticelli, Michelangelo, Raphael, Giotto, Donatello, and Titian, and architects such as Filippo Brunelleschi, Leon Battista Alberti, Andrea Palladio, and Donato Bramante. Following the conclusion of the Western Schism in favor of Rome at the Council of Constance, the new Pope Martin V returned to the Papal States after a 3-years-long journey that touched many Italian cities and restored Italy as the sole center of Western Christianity. During the course of this voyage, the Medici Bank was made the official credit institution of the papacy, and several significant ties were established between the Church and the new political dynasties of the peninsula. The Pope's status as elective monarchs turned the conclaves and consistories of the Renaissance into political battles between the courts of Italy for primacy in the peninsula and access to the immense resources of the Catholic Church. In 1439, Pope Eugenius Roman IV and the Byzantine Emperor John Roman VIII Palaiologos signed a reconciliation agreement between the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church at the Council of Florence hosted by Cosimo the Old de' Medici. In 1453, Italian forces under Giovanni Giustiniani were sent by Pope Nicholas V to defend the walls of Constantinople, but the decisive battle was lost to the more advanced Turkish army equipped with cannons, and Byzantium fell to Sultan Mehmed Roman II. The fall of Constantinople led to the migration of Greek scholars and texts to Italy, fueling the rediscovery of Greco-Roman humanism. Humanist rulers such as Federico da Montefeltro and Pope Pius Roman II worked to establish ideal cities where man is the measure of all things, and therefore founded Urbino and Pinza respectively. Pico della Mirandola wrote the oration on the dignity of man, considered the manifesto of Renaissance humanism, in which he stressed the importance of free will in human beings. The humanist historian Leonardo Bruni was the first to divide human history in 3 periods: antiquity, Middle Ages, and modernity. The second consequence of the fall of Constantinople was the beginning of the Age of Discovery. Italian explorers and navigators from the dominant maritime republics, eager to find an alternative route to the Indies in order to bypass the Ottoman Empire, offered their services to monarchs of Atlantic countries and played a key role in ushering the Age of Discovery and the European colonization of the Americas. The most notable among them were Christopher Columbus, colonizer in the name of Spain, who is credited with discovering the New World and the opening of the Americas for conquest and settlement by Europeans; John Cabot, sailing for England, who was the first European to set foot in New Found land and explore parts of the North American continent in 1497; Amerigo Vespucci, sailing for Portugal, who first demonstrated in about 1501 that the New World was not Asia, as initially conjectured, but a fourth continent previously unknown to people of the Old World; and Giovanni da Verrazzano, at the service of France, renowned as the first European to explore the Atlantic coast of North America between Florida and New Brunswick in 1524. Following the fall of Constantinople, the wars in Lombardy came to an end, and a defensive alliance known as Italic League, was formed between Venice, Naples, Florence, Milan, and the papacy. Lorenzo the Magnificent de' Medici was the greatest Florentine patron of the Renaissance and supporter of the Italic League. He notably avoided the collapse of the League in the aftermath of the Pazzi conspiracy and during the aborted invasion of Italy by the Turks. However, the military campaign of Charles Roman VIII of France in Italy caused the end of the Italic League and initiated the Italian wars between the Valois and the Habsburgs. During the high Renaissance of the 1500s, Italy was therefore both the main European battleground and the cultural economic center of the continent. Popes such as Julius Roman II fought for the control of Italy against foreign monarchs. Others, such as Paul Roman III, preferred to mediate between the European powers in order to secure peace in Italy. In the middle of this conflict, the Medici popes Leo X and Clement Roman VII opposed the Protestant Reformation and advanced the interests of their family. In 1559, at the end of the French invasions of Italy and of the Italian wars, the many states of northern Italy remained part of the Holy Roman Empire indirectly subject to the Austrian Habsburgs, while all of southern Italy and Milan were under Spanish Habsburg rule. The papacy remained a powerful force and launched the Counter-Reformation. Key events of the period include the Council of Trent, the excommunication of Elizabeth I, and the Battle of Lepanto, both occurring during the pontificate of Pius V, the construction of the Gregorian Observatory, the adoption of the Gregorian calendar, and the Jesuit China mission of Matteo Ricci under Pope Gregory Roman XIII, the French Wars of Religion, the Long Turkish War, and the execution of Giordano Bruno in 1600 under Pope Clement Roman VIII, the birth of the Lyncian Academy of the Papal States, of which the main figure was Galileo Galilei, the final phases of the 30 Years' War during the pontificates of Urban Roman VIII and Innocent X, and the formation of the last Holy League by Innocent Roman XI during the Great Turkish War. The Italian economy declined during the 1600s and 1700s. Following the European wars of succession of the 18th century, the north fell under the influence of the Habsburg, Lorraine of Austria, while the south passed to a cadet branch of the Spanish Bourbons. During the coalition wars, northern and central Italy was reorganized by Napoleon in a number of sister republics of France and later as a kingdom of Italy in personal union with the French Empire. The southern half of the peninsula was administered by Joachim Murat, Napoleon's brother-in-law, who was crowned as King of Naples. The 1814 Congress of Vienna restored the situation of the late 18th century, but the ideals of the French Revolution could not be eradicated and soon resurfaced during the political upheavals that characterized the first part of the 19th century. During the Napoleonic era in 1797, the first official adoption of the Italian tricolor as a national flag by a sovereign Italian state, the Cispadane Republic, a Napoleonic sister republic of revolutionary France, took place upon the basis of the events following the French Revolution, which, among its ideals, advocated the national self-determination. This event is celebrated by the Tricolor Day. The Italian national colors appeared for the first time on a tricolor cockade in 1789, anticipating by 7 years the first green, white, and red Italian military war flag, which was adopted by the Lombard Legion in 1796. Unification. The birth of the Kingdom of Italy was the result of efforts by Italian nationalists and monarchists loyal to the House of Savoy to establish a united kingdom encompassing the entire Italian peninsula. By the mid-19th century, rising Italian nationalism, along with other social, economic, and military events, led to a period of revolutionary political upheaval. Following the Congress of Vienna in 1815, the political and social Italian unification movement, or Risorgimento, emerged to unite Italy, consolidating the different states of the peninsula and liberate it from foreign control. A prominent radical figure was the patriotic journalist Giuseppe Mazzini, member of the secret revolutionary society Carbonari and founder of the influential political movement Young Italy in the early 1830s, who favored a unitary republic and advocated a broad nationalist movement. His prolific output of propaganda helped the Unification movement stay active. In this context, in 1847, the first public performance of the song, the Italian national anthem since 1946, took place. Il Canto degli Italiani, written by Goffredo Mameli, set to music by Michele Novaro, is also known as the Inno di Mameli after the author of the lyrics or Fratelli d'Italia from its opening line. The most famous member of Young Italy was the revolutionary and General Giuseppe Garibaldi, renowned for his extremely loyal followers, who led the Italian Republican drive for unification in southern Italy. However, the northern Italy monarchy of the House of Savoy in the Kingdom of Sardinia, whose government was led by Camillo Benso, Count of Cavour, also had ambitions of establishing a united Italian state. In the context of the 1848 liberal revolutions that swept through Europe, an unsuccessful first war of independence was declared on Austria. In 1855, the Kingdom of Sardinia became an ally of Britain and France in the Crimean War, giving Cavour's diplomacy legitimacy in the eyes of the great powers. The Kingdom of Sardinia again attacked the Austrian Empire in the Second Italian War of Independence of 1859, with the aid of France, resulting in liberating Lombardy. On the basis of the Plombières Agreement, the Kingdom of Sardinia ceded Savoy and Nice to France, an event that caused the Nissert exodus, that was the emigration of a quarter of the Nissert Italians to Italy and the Nissert Vespers. In 1860–1861, Garibaldi led the drive for unification in Naples and Sicily, while the House of Savoy troops occupied the central territories of the Italian peninsula except Rome and part of Papal States. Tino was the site of the famous meeting of 26 October 1860 between Giuseppe Garibaldi and Victor Emmanuel Roman II, last king of Sardinia, in which Garibaldi shook Victor Emmanuel's hand and hailed him as king of Italy. Thus Garibaldi sacrificed republican hopes for the sake of Italian unity under a monarchy. Cavour agreed to include Garibaldi's southern Italy, allowing it to join the union with the Kingdom of Sardinia in 1860. This allowed the Sardinian government to declare a united Italian kingdom on 17 March 1861. Victor Emmanuel Roman II then became the first king of a united Italy, and the capital was moved from Turin to Florence. The title of King of Italy had been out of use since the abdication of Napoleon I of France on 6 April 1814. In 1866, Victor Emmanuel Roman II allied with Prussia during the Austro-Prussian War, waging the Third Italian War of Independence, which allowed Italy to annex Venetia finally in 1870 as France abandoned its garrisons in Rome during the disastrous Franco-Prussian War to keep the large Prussian army at bay. The Italians rushed to fill the power gap by taking over the Papal States. Italian unification was completed, and shortly afterwards Italy's capital was moved to Rome. Victor Emmanuel, Garibaldi, Cavour, and Mazzini have been referred as Italy's forefathers of the fatherland. Liberal period. The new Kingdom of Italy obtained great power status. The constitutional law of the Kingdom of Sardinia, the Albertine Statute of 1848, was extended to the whole Kingdom of Italy in 1861 and provided for basic freedoms of the new state, but electoral laws excluded the non-property and uneducated classes from voting. The government of the new kingdom took place in a framework of parliamentary constitutional monarchy dominated by liberal forces. As northern Italy quickly industrialized, the south and rural areas of the north remained underdeveloped and overpopulated, forcing millions of people to migrate abroad and fueling a large and influential diaspora. The Italian Socialist Party constantly increased in strength, challenging the traditional liberal and conservative establishment. Starting in the last 2 decades of the 19th century, Italy developed into a colonial power by forcing under its rule Eritrea and Somalia in East Africa, Tripolitania and Cyrenaica in North Africa, and the Dodecanese Islands. From 2 November 1899 to 7 September 1901, Italy also participated as part of the Eight-Nation Alliance forces during the Boxer Rebellion in China. On 7 September 1901, a concession in Tientsin was ceded to the country, and on 7 June 1902, the concession was taken into Italian possession and administered by a consul. In 1913, male universal suffrage was adopted. The pre-war period, dominated by Giovanni Giolitti, prime minister 5 times between 1892 and 1921, was characterized by the economic, industrial, and political-cultural modernization of Italian society. Italy entered into the First World War in 1915 with the aim of completing national unity. For this reason, the Italian intervention in the First World War is also considered the Fourth Italian War of Independence in a historiographical perspective that identifies in the latter the conclusion of the unification of Italy, whose military actions began during the revolutions of 1848 with the First Italian War of Independence. Italy, nominally allied with the German Empire and the Empire of Austria-Hungary in the Triple Alliance in 1915, joined the Allies into World War I with a promise of substantial territorial gains that included western Inner Carniola, former Austrian littoral Dalmatia, as well as parts of the Ottoman Empire. The country gave a fundamental contribution to the victory of the conflict as one of the Big Four top Allied powers. The war on the Italian front was initially inconclusive, as the Italian army got stuck in a long attrition war in the Alps, making little progress and suffering heavy losses. However, the reorganization of the army and the conscription of the so-called 99 boys led to more effective Italian victories in major battles, such as on Monte Grappa and in a series of battles on the Piave River. Eventually, in October 1918, the Italians launched a massive offensive culminating in the victory of Vittorio Veneto, the Italian victory, which was announced by the Bollettino della Vittoria, and the Bollettino della Vittoria navale marked the end of the war on the Italian front, secured the dissolution of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and was chiefly instrumental in ending the First World War less than 2 weeks later. Italian armed forces were also involved in the African theatre, the Balkan theatre, the Middle Eastern theatre, and then took part in the occupation of Constantinople. During the war, more than 650,000 Italian soldiers and as many civilians died, and the kingdom went to the brink of bankruptcy. The Treaty of St. Germain-en-Laye and the Treaty of Rapallo allowed the annexation of Trentino Alto Adige, the Julian March Istria, and the Kavarner Gulf, as well as the Dalmatian city of Zara. The subsequent Treaty of Rome led to the annexation of the city of Fiume by Italy. Italy did not receive other territories promised by the Treaty of London, so this outcome was denounced as a mutilated victory. The rhetoric of mutilated victory was adopted by Benito Mussolini and led to the rise of Italian fascism, becoming a key point in the propaganda of fascist Italy. Historians regard mutilated victory as a political myth used by fascists to fuel Italian imperialism and obscure the successes of liberal Italy in the aftermath of World War I. Italy also gained a permanent seat in the League of Nations' Executive Council. Fascist regime. The socialist agitations that followed the devastation of the Great War, inspired by the Russian Revolution, led to counter-revolution and repression throughout Italy. The liberal establishment, fearing a Soviet-style revolution, started to endorse the small national fascist party led by Benito Mussolini. In October 1922, the blackshirts of the National Fascist Party attempted a mass demonstration and a coup named the March on Rome, which failed, but at the last minute King Victor Emmanuel Roman III refused to proclaim a state of siege and appointed Mussolini prime minister, thereby transferring political power to the fascists without armed conflict. Over the next few years, Mussolini banned all political parties and curtailed personal liberties, thus forming a dictatorship. These actions attracted international attention and eventually inspired similar dictatorships such as Nazi Germany and Francoist Spain. Italian fascism is based upon Italian nationalism and imperialism, and in particular seeks to complete what it considers as the incomplete project of the unification of Italy by incorporating Italia Irredenta into the state of Italy. To the east of Italy, the fascists claimed that Dalmatia was a land of Italian culture whose Italians, including those of Italianized South Slavic descent, had been driven out of Dalmatia and into exile in Italy and supported the return of Italians of Dalmatian heritage. Mussolini identified Dalmatia as having strong Italian cultural roots for centuries, similarly to Istria via the Roman Empire and the Republic of Venice. To the south of Italy, the fascists claimed Malta, which belonged to the United Kingdom, and Corfu, which instead belonged to Greece. To the north claimed Italian Switzerland, while to the west claimed Corsica, Nice, and Savoy, which belonged to France. The fascist regime produced literature on Corsica that presented evidence of the island's Italianity. The fascist regime produced literature on Nice that justified that Nice was an Italian land based on historic, ethnic, and linguistic grounds. The armistice of Villa Giusti, which ended fighting between Italy and Austria-Hungary at the end of World War I, resulted in Italian annexation of neighboring parts of Yugoslavia. During the interwar period, the fascist Italian government undertook a campaign of Italianization in the areas it annexed, which suppressed Slavic language, schools, political parties, and cultural institutions. Between 1922 and the beginning of World War II, the affected people were also the German-speaking and Latin-speaking populations of Trentino Alto Adige and the French and Arpitan-speaking regions of the Western Alps, such as the Aosta Valley. Mussolini promised to bring Italy back as a great power in Europe, building a new Roman Empire and holding power over the Mediterranean Sea. In propaganda, fascists used the ancient Roman motto Mare Nostrum to describe the Mediterranean. For this reason, the fascist regime engaged in interventionist foreign policy. In 1923, the Greek island of Corfu was briefly occupied by Italy after the assassination of General Talini in Greek territory. In 1925, Italy forced Albania to become a de facto protectorate. In 1935, Mussolini invaded Ethiopia and founded Italian East Africa, resulting in an international alienation and leading to Italy's withdrawal from the League of Nations. Italy allied with Nazi Germany and the Empire of Japan and strongly supported Francisco Franco in the Spanish Civil War. In 1939, Italy formally annexed Albania. Italy entered World War II on 10 June 1940. The Italians initially advanced in British Somaliland, Egypt, the Balkans, and Eastern fronts. They were, however, subsequently defeated on the Eastern Front as well as in the East African Campaign and the North African Campaign, losing as a result their territories in Africa and in the Balkans. During World War II, Italian war crimes included extrajudicial killings and ethnic cleansing, a deportation of about 25,000 people, mainly Jews, Croats, and Slovenians, to the Italian concentration camps such as Rab-Gonars, Monago, Raniksite-Anghyri, and elsewhere. Yugoslav partisans perpetrated their own crimes against the local ethnic Italian population during and after the war, including the Foyd massacres. In Italy and Yugoslavia, unlike in Germany, few war crimes were prosecuted. An Allied invasion of Sicily began in July 1943, leading to the collapse of the fascist regime and the fall of Mussolini on 25 July. Mussolini was deposed and arrested by order of King Victor Emmanuel Roman III in cooperation with the majority of the members of the Grand Council of Fascism, which passed a motion of no confidence. On 8 September, Italy signed the Armistice of Cassibile, ending its war with the Allies. Shortly thereafter, the Germans, with the assistance of the Italian fascists, succeeded in taking control of northern and central Italy. The country remained a battlefield for the rest of the war, with the Allies slowly moving up from the south. In the north, the Germans set up the Italian Social Republic, a Nazi puppet state with Mussolini installed as leader after he was rescued by German paratroopers. Some Italian troops in the south were organized into the Italian co-belligerent army, which fought alongside the Allies for the rest of the war, while other Italian troops, loyal to Mussolini and his RSI, continued to fight alongside the Germans in the National Republican Army. Also, the post-armistice period saw the rise of a large anti-fascist resistance movement, the Resistenza. As a result, the country descended into civil war. The Italian resistance fought a guerrilla war against the Nazi German occupiers and Italian fascist forces, while clashes between the fascist RSI army and the royalist Italian co-belligerent army were rare. In late April 1945, with total defeat looming, Mussolini attempted to escape north but was captured and summarily executed near Lake Como by Italian partisans. His body was then taken to Milan, where it was hung upside down at a service station for public viewing and to provide confirmation of his demise. Hostilities ended on 29 April 1945, when the German forces in Italy surrendered. Nearly 500,000 Italians died in the conflict. Society was divided, and the Italian economy had been all but destroyed. Per capita income in 1944 was at its lowest point since the beginning of the 20th century. The aftermath of World War I and II left Italy also with an anger against the monarchy for its endorsement of the fascist regime for the previous 20 years. These frustrations contributed to a revival of the Italian Republican movement. Republican era. Italy became a republic after the 1946 Italian institutional referendum held on 2 June, a day celebrated since as Festa della Repubblica. This was the first time Italian women voted at the national level. Victor Emmanuel, Roman III's son, Umberto Roman II, was forced to abdicate and exiled. The Republican Constitution was approved in 1948. Under the Treaty of Peace with Italy 1947, areas next to the Adriatic Sea were annexed by Yugoslavia, causing the Istrian-Dalmatian exodus, which led to the emigration of between 230,000 and 350,000 of local ethnic Italians, the others being ethnic Slovenians, ethnic Croatians, and ethnic Istro-Romanians choosing to maintain Italian citizenship. Later, the Free Territory of Trieste was divided between the two states. Italy lost all of its colonial possessions, formally ending the Italian Empire. The Italian border today has existed since 1975, when Trieste was formally re-annexed to Italy. Fears of a possible communist takeover proved crucial for the 18 April 1948, when the Christian Democrats under Alcide de Gasperi obtained a landslide victory. Consequently, in 1949, Italy became a member of NATO. The Marshall Plan revived the Italian economy, which, until the late 1960s, enjoyed a period of sustained economic growth commonly called the economic miracle. In the 1950s, Italy became one of the 6 founding countries of the European Communities, a forerunner of the European Union. From the late 1960s until the early 80s, the country experienced the years of lead, a period characterized by economic crisis, especially after the 1973 oil crisis, widespread social conflicts, and terrorist massacres. In the 1980s, for the first time since 1945, 2 governments were led by non-Christian Democrat premiers, one Republican and one socialist. The Christian Democrats remained, however, the main government party. The economy recovered, and Italy became the world's 5th largest industrial nation after it gained entry into the G7 in the 1970s. However, the Italian national debt skyrocketed, passing 100% of the country's GDP. Italy faced terror attacks between 1992 and 1993 perpetrated by the Sicilian mafia as a consequence of new anti-mafia measures launched by the government. 1 year later, tourist spots were attacked, leaving 10 dead and 93 injured and causing severe damage to cultural heritage such as the Uffizi Gallery. The Catholic Church openly condemned the mafia, and an anti-mafia priest shot dead in Rome. In the early 1990s, voters disenchanted with political paralysis, massive public debt, and extensive corruption uncovered by the Clean Hands investigation demanded radical reforms. The scandals involved all major parties, but especially those in the government coalition. The Christian Democrats, who ruled for almost 50 years, underwent a severe crisis and eventually disbanded, splitting into several factions. The Communists reorganized as a social democratic force. During the 1990s and 2000s, center-right and center-left coalitions alternately governed the country. Amidst the Great Recession, Berlusconi resigned in 2011 and was replaced by the technocratic cabinet of Mario Monti. Following the 2013 general election, the vice secretary of the Democratic Party, Enrico Letta, formed a new government at the head of a right-left grand coalition. In 2014, challenged by the new secretary of the PD, Matteo Renzi, Letta resigned and was replaced by Renzi. The new government started constitutional reforms. On 4 December, constitutional reform was rejected in a referendum, and Renzi resigned. Paolo Gentiloni was appointed prime minister. In the European migrant crisis of the 2010s, Italy was the entry point and leading destination for most asylum seekers entering the EU. Between 2013 and 2018, the country took in over 700,000 migrants and refugees, mainly from sub-Saharan Africa, which caused strain on the public purse and a surge in support for far-right or Eurosceptic parties. The 2018 general election was characterized by a strong showing of the Five Star Movement and the Lega. Professor Giuseppe Conte became prime minister at the head of a populist coalition between these two parties. After only 14 months, the lead withdrew its support from Conte, who formed a new government coalition between the Five Star Movement and the center-left. In 2020, Italy was severely hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. Conte's government imposed a national lockdown. With more than 155,000 confirmed victims, Italy was one of the countries with the highest deaths in the worldwide coronavirus pandemic. The pandemic caused a severe economic disruption in which Italy was one of the most affected countries. In February 2020, one after a government crisis within his majority, Conte was forced to resign, and Mario Draghi, former president of the European Central Bank, formed a national unity government supported by most of the main parties, pledging to oversee implementation of economic stimulus to face the crisis caused by the pandemic. On 22 October 2022, Giorgia Meloni was sworn in as Italy's first female prime minister. Her Brothers of Italy party formed a right-wing government with the far-right League and Berlusconi's. Geography. Italy, whose territory largely coincides with the homonymous geographical region, is located in southern Europe, and it is also considered a part of Western Europe between latitudes 35 degrees and 47 degrees N and longitudes 6 degrees and 19 degrees E to the north. Italy borders France, Switzerland, Austria, and Slovenia, and is roughly delimited by the Alpine watershed enclosing the Po Valley and the Venetian Plain. To the south, it consists of the entirety of the Italian peninsula and the two Mediterranean islands of Sicily and Sardinia, in addition to many smaller islands. The sovereign states of San Marino and the Vatican City are enclaves within Italy, while Campania d'Italia is an Italian exclave in Switzerland. The country's total area is 301,230 km², of which 294,020 km² is land and 7,210 km² is water. Including the islands, Italy has a coastline and border of 7,000 600 km on the Adriatic, Ionian, Tyrrhenian seas and borders shared with France, Austria, Slovenia, and Switzerland. San Marino and Vatican City, both enclaves, account for the remainder. Over 35% of the Italian territory is mountainous. The Apennine Mountains form the peninsula's backbone, and the Alps form most of its northern boundary, where Italy's highest point is located on Mont Blanc's summit. Other worldwide known mountains in Italy include the Matterhorn, Monte Rosa, Gran Paradiso in the West Alps, and Bernina Stelvio and Dolomites along the eastern side. The Po, Italy's longest river, flows from the Alps on the western border with France and crosses the Padan Plain on its way to the Adriatic Sea. The Po Valley is the largest plain in Italy with 46,000 km², and it represents over 70% of the total plain area in the country. Many elements of the Italian territory are of volcanic origin. Most of the small islands and archipelagos in the south, like Capraia, Panza, Ischia, Iali Ostica, and Pantelleria, are volcanic islands. There are also active volcanoes: Mount Etna in Sicily, Vulcano, Stromboli, and Vesuvius. The 5 largest lakes are in order of diminishing size: Garda, Maggiore, Como, Trasimeno, and Bolsena. 4 different seas surround the Italian peninsula in the Mediterranean Sea from 3 sides: the Adriatic Sea in the east, the Ionian Sea in the south, and the Ligurian Sea and the Tyrrhenian Sea in the west. The longest Italian river is the Po, which flows for either or. Most of the rivers of Italy drain either into the Adriatic Sea or the Tyrrhenian Sea. Although the country includes the Italian peninsula, adjacent islands, and most of the southern Alpine basin, some of Italy's territory extends beyond the Alpine basin, and some islands are located outside the Eurasian continental shelf. These territories are the comuni of Livigno, Saxon, Venetian, Tablaccius, Forte, Treviso, Gran im Vinschgau, which are all part of the Danube's drainage basin, while the Val di Lei constitutes part of the Rhine's basin, and the islands of Lampedusa and Lampione are on the African continental shelf. Environment. After its quick industrial growth, Italy took a long time to confront its environmental problems. After several improvements, it now ranks 84th in the world for ecological sustainability. National parks cover about 5% of the country, while the total area protected by national parks, regional parks, and nature reserves covers about 10.5% of the Italian territory, to which must be added 12% of coasts protected by marine protected areas. In the last decade, Italy has become one of the world's leading producers of renewable energy, ranking as the world's 4th largest holder of installed solar energy capacity and the 6th largest holder of wind power capacity in 2010. Renewable energies provided approximately 37% Italy's energy consumption in 2020. However, air pollution remains a severe problem, especially in the industrialized north, reaching the 10th highest level worldwide of industrial carbon dioxide emissions in the 1990s. Italy is the 12th largest carbon dioxide producer. Extensive traffic and congestion in the largest metropolitan areas continue to cause severe environmental and health issues, even if smog levels have decreased dramatically since the 1970s and 1980s, and the presence of smog is becoming an increasingly rare phenomenon and levels of sulfur dioxide are decreasing. Many watercourses and coastal stretches have also been contaminated by industrial and agricultural activity, while because of rising water levels, Venice has been regularly flooded throughout recent years. Waste from industrial activity is not always disposed of by legal means and has led to permanent health effects on inhabitants of affected areas, as in the case of the Seveso disaster. The country has also operated several nuclear reactors between 1963 and 1990, but after the Chernobyl disaster and a referendum on the issue, the nuclear program was terminated, a decision that was overturned by the government in 2008 planning to build up to 4 nuclear power plants with French technology. This was in turn struck down by a referendum following the Fukushima nuclear accident. Deforestation, illegal building developments, and poor land management policies have led to significant erosion all over Italy's mountainous regions, leading to major ecological disasters like the 1963 Vajont Dam flood, the 1998 Sarno, and 2009 Messina mudslides. The country had a 2019 Forest Landscape Integrity Index mean score of 3.65/10, ranking it 142nd globally out of 172 countries. Biodiversity. Italy has probably the highest level of faunal biodiversity in Europe, with over 57,000 species recorded, representing more than a third of all European fauna, and the highest level of biodiversity of both animal and plant species within the European Union. Italy's varied geological structure contributes to its high climate and habitat diversity. The Italian peninsula is in the center of the Mediterranean Sea, forming a corridor between Central Europe and North Africa, and has a coastline. Italy also receives species from the Balkans, Eurasia, and the Middle East. Italy's varied geological structure, including the Alps and the Apennines, central Italian woodlands, and southern Italian garrigue and maquis shrubland, also contribute to high climate and habitat diversity. The fauna of Italy includes 4,777 endemic animal species, which include the Sardinian long-eared bat, Sardinian red deer, spectacled salamander, brown-cave salamander, Italian newt, Italian frog, Apennine yellow-bellied toad, Italian wall lizard, Aeolian wall lizard, Sicilian wall lizard, Italian Aesculapian snake, and Sicilian pond turtle. In Italy, there are 119 mammals species, 550 bird species, 69 reptile species, 39 amphibian species, 623 fish species, and 56,213 invertebrate species, of which 37,303 insect species. The flora of Italy was traditionally estimated to comprise about 5,500 vascular plant species. However, 6,759 species are recorded in the data bank of Italian vascular flora. Italy has 1371 endemic plant species and subspecies, which include Sicilian fir, Barbarissina columbine, sea marigold, lavender cotton, and Acriana violet. Italy is a signatory to the Berne Convention on the Conservation of European Wildlife and Natural Habitats and the Habitats Directive, both affording protection to Italian fauna and flora. Italy has many botanical gardens and historic gardens, some of which are known outside the country. The Italian garden is stylistically based on symmetry, axial geometry, and on the principle of imposing order over nature. It influenced the history of gardening, especially French gardens and English gardens. The Italian garden was influenced by Roman gardens and Italian Renaissance gardens. The Italian wolf is the national animal of Italy, while the national tree of the country is the strawberry tree. The reasons for this choice are related to the fact that the Italian wolf, which inhabits the Apennine Mountains in the Western Alps, features prominently in Latin and Italian cultures, such as in the legend of the founding of Rome, while the green leaves, white flowers, and red berries of the strawberry tree, which is native to the Mediterranean region, recall the colors of the flag of Italy. Climate. The climate of Italy is influenced by the large body of water of the Mediterranean Sea that surrounds Italy on every side except the north. These seas constitute a reservoir of heat and humidity for Italy. Within the southern temperate zone, they determine a Mediterranean climate with local differences due to the geomorphology of the territory, which tends to make its mitigating effects felt especially in high-pressure conditions. Because of the length of the peninsula and the mostly mountainous hinterland, the climate of Italy is highly diverse. In most of the inland northern and central regions, the climate ranges from humid subtropical to humid continental and oceanic. The climate of the Po Valley geographical region is mostly humid subtropical, with cool winters and hot summers. The coastal areas of Liguria, Tuscany, and most of the south generally fit the Mediterranean climate stereotype. Conditions on the coast are different from those in the interior, particularly during winter months when the higher altitudes tend to be cold, wet, and often snowy. The coastal regions have mild winters and hot and generally dry summers. Lowland valleys are hot in summer. Average winter temperatures vary from around 0°C in the Alps to 12°C in Sicily, so average summer temperatures range from 20°C to over 25°C. Winters can vary widely across the country with lingering cold, foggy, and snowy periods in the north and milder, sunnier conditions in the south. Summers are hot across the country except for at high altitude, particularly in the south. Northern and central areas can experience occasional strong thunderstorms from spring to autumn. Politics. Italy has been a unitary parliamentary republic since June 1946, when the monarchy was abolished by a constitutional referendum. The President of Italy, currently Sergio Mattarella since 2015, is Italy's head of state. The President is elected for a single 7 year mandate by the Parliament of Italy and some regional voters in joint session. Italy has a written democratic constitution resulting from the work of a constituent assembly formed by the representatives of all the anti-fascist forces that contributed to the defeat of Nazi and fascist forces during the Italian Civil War. Government.
Rayloft. Knowledge as new power.